humanity's last hope. I've always loved dust. Yes, I know it sounds strange. To most people, dust is just dirt, something to get rid of. But for me, Anna, a geologist, it was an integral part of life, a part of history. Every grain of sand, every stone in the desert told its own 1,000-year-old story, and I was here to read it. I was 32, and I'd spent most of my adult life among endless sands, under a scorching sun, in a silence broken only by the wind and the roar of my SUV. This desert, as harsh as it was my home, my laboratory, my teacher. It gave me a sense of peace, despite the constant struggle for survival. This morning promised nothing out of the ordinary. I woke before dawn, when the sky over the horizon was just beginning to bloom with shades of orange and pink. A sunbeam pierced through a gap in my tent flap, as if to remind me of the inevitable inferno that awaited. I brewed strong coffee on my old gas stove, inhaling the bitter aroma that instantly dispelled the last vestiges of sleep. Breakfast, hardtack and a can of stewed meat, wasn't the best, but it was nourishing. Every day in the desert is a challenge, and I was ready for it. My mission lately had been particularly interesting. I was investigating anomalies that, according to satellite images, had appeared deep in one of the most remote regions of the Great Sandy Desert. They were strange, almost perfect circles that couldn't be natural formations. My first expedition yielded no results, only more questions. So I had returned, this time alone, with more detailed equipment and an unbreakable resolve. I knew other geologists considered it a waste of time and resources, but something about these circles, something almost imperceptible, drew me in like a magnet. I believed there was something more there than just erosion or an optical illusion. I'd been driving for over 3 hours when my SUV shuddered on the uneven surface. Checking the navigator, I realized I had strayed about 20 kilometers off course. I was usually very careful, but fatigue must have taken its toll. I decided to turn back, but then, behind the next dune, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. It couldn't be real. My eyes, accustomed to the monotony of the sand dunes, refused to believe what they were seeing. There, in the middle of nowhere, like a giant silver fish that had leaped from nothingness, lay a ship. Not the wreckage of a plane, not a meteorite. It was, without a doubt, a ship. Its surface gleamed in the sun, reflecting the light in a way that made the material impossible to identify. It was perfectly smooth, without a single seam, without a single window, as if cast from a single piece of some unknown substance. It was the size of a small truck, elongated, with sleek, futuristic lines that had nothing in common with any technology one knew. It was something that belonged to the future, or perhaps a past we had long forgotten. I turned off the engine. The silence descended upon me, thick and heavy, with only the soft whisper of the wind drifting over the sands. I could feel the adrenaline pulsing in my temples. This was incredible, something that surpassed my wildest scientific fantasies. I grabbed my camera, which always hung around my neck, and began taking pictures, my hands trembling as I captured every detail. I moved closer, step by step, feeling the sand crunch under my heavy boots. Even from 10 meters away, I couldn't see any doors or hatches. The ship was a monolith. I walked around its perimeter, searching for any kind of entrance. And then, on the right side, I saw what looked like a thin, almost invisible slit. It was so perfect that I had barely noticed it, as if it were part of the material itself. I ran my hand over it. The surface was cool, smooth as silk, but with a faint, barely perceptible vibratory field. I pressed on it. Nothing. I tried to push it, to pull it. Nothing. Stepping back, I swept my palm across it, as if searching for a hidden button, but to no avail. Disappointed, I was about to walk away when, completely by accident, my finger slid over a small indentation with a texture that was barely different. It was almost invisible, and I would have never noticed it if my finger hadn't brushed against it. When I touched it, the indentation grew warm under my finger. And then, with a soft, almost inaudible hiss, as if air were escaping from some sealed space, a section of the wall next to the slit silently slid aside, revealing a dark, inviting opening. My heart began to race again. It was dark inside, but I could smell a faint, pleasant scent, something like ozone and wet earth after rain. It was strange, considering I was in the middle of a dry desert. I cautiously took a step into the unknown. I held my breath. This was a moment that could change everything. And I knew it. The instinct that had always guided me screamed, "Go! Explore! Find out!" The darkness wasn't absolute, but it was enough for me to pull out my flashlight. The beam of light scattered the shadows, snatching strange shapes from the gloom. The walls were made of the same smooth, silvery material as the exterior. No seams, no reinforcements. It was strangely quiet inside, so quiet I could hear my own breathing. The air was cool and fresh, nothing like the suffocating heat of the desert. The space wasn't large, but it felt much bigger than it should have, looking at the ship size from the outside. It was a strange sensation. In the center was some kind of console, like a control panel, but without any buttons or screens, just a smooth, black surface. Above it, strange symbols hung in the air, glowing with a soft, pulsating blue light. I didn't understand any of them, but they seemed logical, almost alive. I approached the console, touching it cautiously. The surface was warm. When my finger touched one of the symbols, it expanded, filling the space around it, and then vanished, giving way to an image. It was like a hologram, but far more realistic than anything I had ever seen. I saw myself. My heart beat faster. It was me, but older. Much older. She must have been around 80. Her hair was completely white, her face lined with deep wrinkles, but her eyes were the same as mine, full of determination and an unquenchable curiosity. She was speaking, but I couldn't hear any sound. The image was silent, like a silent film. I saw her lips move, and a flash of desperation crossed her gaze. What was she trying to tell me? I tried touching another symbol. A new image. Me again, but in a different setting. I was in some kind of laboratory, surrounded by complex equipment I had never seen before. Her movements were focused, swift, and precise. I could feel the excitement coming from her. She was working on something incredibly important. Then the image changed. It was my city, but it was different. It was surrounded by desert. I shuddered. The desert was already around my city, but not this close. In the image, the sands had almost swallowed the city's outskirts. Buildings were half buried, trees were withered, and the sky was shrouded in a cloudy gray haze. It was the sight of a dying city. I stepped back from the console, my breath catching in my throat. This was too much. It was impossible. I didn't believe in time travel. I didn't believe in predictions. I was a geologist, a person of science, of facts. But what I was seeing didn't fit into any framework of my understanding. I looked around, searching for any logical explanation. Could this be some kind of hoax? But who could have done it? And why? I approached the console again, this time with more resolve. I touched another symbol. And this time, I heard a sound. It was quiet, barely audible, but it was my voice. The voice of my older self. "Anna," the voice whispered. "If you're hearing this, it means I succeeded. I sent you a message. A message, a warning about the dreadful future." My heart began to pound like crazy. It was my voice. I knew it as well as my own. "You probably don't believe me," the voice continued. "And I don't blame you. I wouldn't have believed it either. But what you're seeing is the truth. The desert is advancing. It's consuming the world." I felt a cold sweat run down my back. "What does that mean?" I whispered in reply, though I knew she couldn't hear me. "The ship," the voice rang out. "This ship is our only chance. I spent 50 years of my life building it. It's an ark. An ark for everything we can save." My eyes widened. An ark. It sounded too fantastic. But this voice, my voice, was so full of despair and determination that I couldn't ignore it. You saw your city, the voice continued, and I felt goosebumps run over my skin. It's dying. And this is only the beginning. The voice fell silent. Then it spoke again, but with a different, more urgent tone. You have to hurry. Time is not on our side. The desert is approaching faster than you think. Every day, every hour is precious. You must find what I have hidden. It is the key. The key to salvation. The message cut off. The image vanished, and once again, the blue symbols hung there, pulsating in the darkness. I stood motionless, my mind refusing to process the information. A ship in the desert. My future. A threat. What the hell was this? I heard a quiet, faint scraping sound from outside. The sound of sand grating against metal. I ran out of the ship, my heart pounding wildly. The sun was already high in the sky, flooding the desert with blinding light. I looked at the horizon, and what I saw made the blood freeze in my veins. Even from my position, far from the city, I could see it. A sandstorm. A huge, menacing sandstorm, approaching with incredible speed. It was far larger than any storm I had ever seen before. It was heading straight for my city. The desert truly was advancing. And it seemed I had been cast in a role in this battle, a battle I knew nothing about. My future, my older self, was warning me. But could I save everyone? Could I save myself? What would happen next? What was I supposed to do? Returning to the city felt like returning from another world. As I drove, I felt as if every grain of sand kicked up by my SUV's wheels carried an echo of the voice from the future. The storm I had seen was approaching, but here in the city, no one felt it yet. The stone buildings seemed as fragile as sandcastles compared to the scale of the threat I had learned about. My city, the place where I was born and raised, now seemed alien to me. I saw people hurrying about their business, laughing, talking, oblivious to the imminent danger that was already breathing down their necks. This feeling of dissonance, of knowing something that no one else did, was unbearable. I decided to go straight to the city council. Perhaps it was naive, but I believed that if I gave them enough evidence, they would listen. I wasn't just some crazed prophet. I was a geologist, a person of science, with an impeccable reputation. I brought the photos of the ship with me, but I knew they wouldn't be enough. I tried to find the words to describe what I had seen and heard. The mayor, Mr. Corbin, was a portly man with a red face and a perpetual smile that never seemed to reach his eyes. He received me in his lavish office, filled with trophies and certificates. "Anna, my dear, what brings you to me in such a hurry?" he said, sinking into his chair. His voice was cloyingly sweet, like honey. I began my story, trying to remain calm. I told him about the anomalous circles, about the ship, about the recordings. I even tried to repeat the words I had heard. Mr. Corbin listened at first with mild surprise, then with disbelief, and finally, that same smile returned to his face, but it was no longer so pleasant. It was skeptical, almost mocking. "Anna, you do realize this sounds, well, like the plot of a science fiction movie," he said, leaning back. "A ship from the future? Prophecies? You're a scientist, Anna. You must understand this is absurd." I showed him the photos. He took them, turned them over in his hands as if examining a work of art rather than evidence. "Interesting," he murmured. "Perhaps some new kind of mirage? Or maybe you've been working too hard. You should get some rest." I felt a surge of irritation. "It's not a mirage, Mr. Corbin. I saw it with my own eyes. And I heard my future self speaking to me." He laughed. It was a short, dry laugh that had nothing to do with amusement. "Anna, I respect your work, but this is beyond the pale. The desert has always been the desert. It isn't advancing. It's just a cyclical climate change." I tried to convince him, but his face had turned to stone. He was no longer listening. In the end, he politely but firmly showed me out. "If you come up with any real evidence, Anna, then we can talk about it." I left the city hall feeling broken. I had spent the whole day trying to be heard by deaf ears. It was like screaming into a void. A sense of helplessness washed over me. No one believed me. Meanwhile, the desert truly was advancing. I began to notice it even in the city. The usually clean streets were now covered with a thin layer of sand carried by the wind. The trees on the outskirts, always green, began to turn yellow, their leaves curling from the heat and lack of moisture. The air became drier, heavier, as if the desert itself were breathing its insatiable, hot breath nearby. I noticed people around me started shaking their heads when I tried to tell them about the ship or the encroaching desert. They began to avoid me like a leper. Some even started calling me Anna the Seer, and it was not a compliment. My heart ached with pain. I was alone, burdened with a heavy knowledge I couldn't share. I started seeing strange things. Were they visions, or just fatigue? I didn't know. But at night, when I closed my eyes, I saw sand. It covered everything. Houses, cars, people. I saw my city being slowly swallowed and dissolved in the sand. Sometimes I would hear a quiet, almost incomprehensible whisper that seemed to come from everywhere. It was a voice like my own, but with more depth, more sorrow. "Hurry," it whispered. "Time is running out." I knew I had to go back to the ship. The answers were there. And the key was there. I felt it with all my soul. It was the only thing I could do. The only chance. I returned to the Ark, feeling it was the only place in the world where I could find answers. Inside, in the cool silence, I activated the console again. This time, I wasn't looking for images, but for information. My future self had told me to find the key, and I was sure it was hidden within the ship's data. On one of the panels, I found a compartment I hadn't noticed before. It opened at my touch, and inside lay several items: an old leather-bound journal, a translucent plate covered in complex schematics, and a smooth blue stone that felt cool in my palm. The journal was written in my handwriting, the handwriting of my older self. With every turned page, the horrifying truth revealed itself to me. The knowledge I gained from it was like an electric shock. It stunned me to my core, but at the same time, it provided an overwhelming clarity. "I know how this sounds, Anna. Insane. But if you're reading this, it means I succeeded," she wrote. "The desert isn't just advancing. It breathes. It's alive. It's a predatory entity that has been dormant for millions of years, and now it's waking up. It feeds on energy, Anna. The world's energy, the energy of life. And it's growing. My city, it's almost gone. We couldn't stop it back then." Every sentence chilled me to the bone. This wasn't a natural disaster. It was a conscious entity, and I, by studying the anomalous circles, had unwittingly been helping it awaken for years. A bitter irony. I focused on the translucent plate. It was an engineering puzzle, but my knowledge of geology and architecture helped me. Every line, every symbol had its meaning. The plate contained the activation algorithms for the Arkansas. The journal explained. The Ark is not just a transport. It's a technological platform that can protect from the desert's consumption. The key, Anna, is not a physical object. The key is understanding. Understanding its nature. You must use this knowledge to activate the Arkansas. It must become our sanctuary. But most importantly, it must become a weapon. I looked up from the journal. My breath was shallow. This was about more than just saving a city. It was about saving the world. I looked at the blue stone. When I held it, I felt a strange warmth spread through my body. It resonated with my brain, helping me process the complex schematics more easily. It wasn't just an artifact, but a part of the link to my future self. I felt a mixture of terror and determination. My life had suddenly turned into an epic battle, but I realized I couldn't handle it alone. I needed allies. And I knew who to turn to. I returned to a city I barely recognized. Sand lay not in a thin layer, but in small dunes on the roadsides. The wind lifted it into the air, creating a constant haze that veiled the sun. The city was slowly suffocating. My situation became more and more isolated. But there were two people who I hoped would believe me. The first was Leo, my old friend, a brilliant, if slightly cynical engineer, whose workshop was cluttered with half-disassembled drones and strange gadgets. He had always been fascinated by my unconventional ideas. I found him soldering a complex circuit board, the air smelling of ozone and rosin. A ship from the future, Anna? Seriously, he said, looking up at me with tired eyes from under his safety goggles, but a smile played at the corners of his lips. Next you'll be telling me you found Atlantis. I silently placed the photos and the translucent plate with the schematics in front of him. He studied them for a long time. His skepticism slowly gave way to a deep fascination. This material, these lines. It's unlike anything I've ever seen, he muttered. I don't believe you. But I believe in your scientific methods. If anyone could find something like this and not go insane, it's you. Show me what you've got. The second was Mia, a young, energetic geology student who had worked with me on the last few expeditions. She was part of a generation that had grown up watching the desert relentlessly advance. I met her in the university library, where, ignoring the official curriculum, she was compiling her own charts on accelerated erosion. I knew it. I knew it wasn't just climate cycles, she exclaimed when she saw my data. Her eyes burned with a mixture of fear and righteous fury. The professors wouldn't listen. They said I was panicking. But the trees are dying. The air is changing. You're not alone, Anna. What do we have to do? Those words were like a breath of fresh air. I felt I wasn't completely alone. With their help, I began to plan. Leo, with his pragmatism, took on deciphering the technical aspects of the ark, while Mia, with her idealism and energy, began to compile lists of necessary supplies and people who might believe us. We became a team. The visions started haunting me with greater intensity. Now I didn't just see the sand. I felt it. I felt it crawling on my skin, filling my lungs. I heard the whisper, no longer distant. It was the voice of the desert, calling me, luring me, promising oblivion. It was a test of my will, my sanity. The moral dilemma was unbearable. The ark was large, but not infinite. Who should I save? I didn't have an answer. But I knew that time was running out. The desert was no longer just crawling. It was running, dragging a great train of sand and relentless wind behind it. Sand. It was everywhere. It seeped through cracks, clogged the lungs, crunched between teeth. My city, once so vibrant, was now drowning in a dead, yellow haze. The wind howled, carrying with it the cry of the desert. I could hear it clearly now, a terrifying whisper of a living, thirsting entity, hungry for ruin. The watch my future self had sent me was now counting down the seconds to the end. We gathered those who believed. There weren't many, about 300 people. Ordinary people who sensed something was wrong. The day came. The sky was shrouded in heavy yellow clouds. We reached the Arkansas. Its silver surface barely gleamed, coated in sand. People entered cautiously. Mia was among them, her calm voice and confidence soothing the children and the elderly. Leo stood at the entrance, managing the process, his face focused and tense, checking the airlock seal after each person entered. They had trusted me. When the last person was inside, I stood before the console. The blue stone in my hand pulsed ever stronger. The voice of my future self echoed in my head again. It must become a weapon. I touched the spiral symbol. The ark vibrated. Its walls began to change, like a living organism. Suddenly, the console came to life, displaying a map of the world. A red spot, symbolizing the desert, was rapidly expanding. And then I felt it. A presence. The desert was here. It surrounded us, trying to consume the Arkansas. I heard its voice, a feeling of all-consuming, insatiable hunger. It wanted us, and it was doing everything it could to keep us from escaping. I understood. The key wasn't just in activation, but in the ability to fly. It was in the journal. My future self didn't just create the Arkansas. She became it. She sacrificed herself. The blue stone in my hand began to vibrate so intensely it felt like it might melt. It began to merge with my skin, becoming a part of me. The pain was sharp, but I gritted my teeth. This was my choice. There was no other way. I understood the price of salvation. Leo Mia, my voice sounded strangely muffled. They turned, and in their eyes, I saw horror and understanding. Continue uploading the last of the data. I have to do this. I placed my hands on the console. The symbols blazed even brighter, spreading over my arms, over my entire body. I felt my consciousness expand, felt myself becoming a part of something far greater, new, pure, and bright, an integral part of the Arkansas. Its metal walls, its systems, all of it became a part of me. My heart now beat in time with its engines. In the last moment, before myself completely dissolved into the ark, I heard the voice of the desert. It was not a whisper, but a cry of fury. It felt the resistance. It felt its prey was slipping away. And then the world around me changed. I was no longer Anna. I was the Arkansas. I felt its every part. I felt the people inside, their fear and hope pulsing within my walls. And I felt the desert, its boundless energy, which sensed us. We began to move. Not up, not forward. We began to submerge. The ark was designed not only to travel on the surface but to journey through the earth itself. It was my final gift to humanity, the chance to hide deep beneath the sands, away from the raging desert on the surface. As we descended, I saw through my senses how the sandstorm consumed the city, how it vanished under its yellow shroud. I felt the pain for the lost lives, for those who did not believe. But now I was more than Anna. I was the ark, and my task was to protect those who remained. Even deep underground, I felt the pulsation of the desert above us. It was a vast, unstoppable force. But now I, the ark, was the only one who could oppose it. I was a refuge, but also a conscious barrier. My life, which once seemed so ordinary, had become part of something immeasurably larger. My fate was now inextricably linked with the fate of those inside me, and with the struggle against the relentless force that breathed above us. The future was uncertain. I didn't know if I could ever be Anna again, but I knew that now, I was where I could save them. And that was all that mattered.